No one came to claim her. That was the first thing. Clara May Whitfield understood as the cold crept deeper into her bones and the echoes of the station faded into silence. The train had long since gone, its whistle dissolving into the snowy horizon, leaving behind only steam, footprints, and a woman with a single suitcase and nowhere left to belong. She stood there longer than she should have, as if waiting for the world to correct itself, as if someone might suddenly remember her name and come running down the platform calling it. But the lamps dimmed, the wind sharpened, and the station master locked the office without looking her in the eye. In that moment, Clara realized she had officially become what people feared most in towns like this: unclaimed, unattached, invisible. Her husband was dead, her father gone years before that, and the family name she carried no longer opened doors. It only explained why they stayed shut. She wrapped her shawl tighter, fingers aching around the handle of her suitcase, the same one she had carried from her mother's house to her husband's, and now from everything she'd ever known into uncertainty. Snow dusted her boots, melting into the worn leather, and still she didn't move, because moving meant choosing a direction, and every direction felt like a mistake. The town of Briar Creek sat just beyond the station, its lights warm but distant, like something meant for other people. Clara had imagined arriving differently. She had pictured a welcome, or at least acknowledgement. Her husband, Thomas, had spoken of this place once, years ago, when they were still hopeful enough to believe plans were promises. He said Briar Creek was quiet, decent, a place where a man could start over. He never finished the thought about what a woman might do there. He never had the chance. The fever took him 3 winters earlier, and everything after that became a slow unraveling. She'd sold what little they had, endured looks that shifted from pity to suspicion, and finally accepted the invitation from a distant cousin who promised work. But the cousin never showed, and the letter she clutched now felt heavier than her suitcase. People passed her on the platform earlier, glancing once and then away, as if acknowledging her would require responsibility. When the last of them disappeared, Clara felt something inside her settle, not peace, but resignation. This was how it happened, she supposed. This was how women like her slipped through the cracks and were later spoken of in past tense. She finally stepped off the platform and onto the snow-packed path leading toward town. Each step was deliberate, careful, as though she might fall through the ground if she rushed. The air smelled of pine and coal smoke, and somewhere a church bell marked the hour, slow and heavy. She had no destination in mind, only the instinct to keep walking until her legs refused. The first building she reached was a closed mercantile, its windows dark. Then a saloon, loud with laughter, that died the moment she paused outside, her reflection faint in the glass. She moved on. She told herself she wasn't ashamed, but the truth was she didn't want to beg. She'd rather sleep in the cold than ask a stranger for mercy, because mercy often came with conditions, and she'd already paid too much in her life. Her breath fogged in front of her, and she counted her steps like prayers, hoping they might lead somewhere safe. That was when she noticed the sheriff's office. It was modest, sturdier than the other buildings, its lights still on despite the late hour. The word sheriff was painted above the door, the letters worn but firm, and something about it made her stop. Not hope exactly, more like instinct. Law meant order, and order meant rules, and rules meant there might be a place for her, even if it was temporary. She hesitated, heart pounding, because walking through that door would mean being seen, being recorded, being asked questions she wasn't sure how to answer. Still, she approached, each step louder than the last, until she stood on the porch and raised her hand to knock. Inside, Sheriff Eli Bennett sat at his desk, staring at paperwork he'd already read twice without comprehension. The lamplight cast shadows across his lined face, and the silence of the office pressed in on him like a weight. Nights were the worst. During the day, he had responsibilities, patrols, disputes, the endless small duties that kept a town running. At night, there was only memory. It had been 4 years since his wife, Margaret, died, and still the absence felt fresh, like a wound that never closed properly. He hadn't remarried, hadn't even entertained the idea. The town had opinions about that, of course. Some said it was loyalty. Others whispered it was stubbornness or guilt. Eli didn't care. All he knew was that the house felt too big, the bed too cold, and the quiet too loud. He stayed late at the office because it gave him purpose, and because going home meant facing a life that no longer fit the shape it once had. When the knock came, it startled him. Visitors were rare at this hour, and his hand instinctively went to the revolver at his side. He stood slowly, every sense alert, and crossed the room to open the door. What he saw wasn't danger. It was a woman, pale and exhausted, snow clinging to her coat, eyes wide, with a mix of fear and resolve. She held a suitcase like it was the last solid thing in the world. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Eli noticed the tremble in her hands, the way she stood straight despite the cold. Pride holding her upright when strength threatened to fail. He'd seen that look before, in war widows, in mothers who'd lost sons, in people who'd learned that asking for help was its own kind of risk. "Sheriff," she said finally, her voice steady but soft, "I'm sorry to trouble you. I just arrived and there's no one here for me." Eli studied her, weighing words and possibilities. The law didn't offer much guidance for moments like this. There was no statute for lost women with nowhere to go, no form to fill out that would make the right decision obvious. He could send her to the boarding house, if there was room. He could suggest the church. He could do what many men did and tell himself it wasn't his problem. Instead, he stepped aside and held the door open. "Come in," he said. "You'll freeze out there." The warmth hit Clara all at once, and with it, the realization of how cold she'd been. She stepped inside, clutching her suitcase, and stood awkwardly while the sheriff closed the door behind her. The office smelled of wood polish and ink, solid and grounding. She felt suddenly small, like a child who'd wandered somewhere she didn't belong. Eli gestured to a chair, and she sat, perching on the edge as if ready to bolt. He returned to his desk but didn't sit. Instead, he leaned against it, arms crossed, giving her space without withdrawing entirely. "What's your name?" he asked. "Clara Whitfield," she replied. Saying it out loud felt strange, like reminding herself she still existed. "I was supposed to meet a cousin, but I don't think she's coming." Eli nodded slowly. He'd heard variations of this story before. Promises made lightly, broken easily. "Do you have money?" "A little," Clara said. "Enough for a night or two, maybe. But I can work. I'm not afraid of it." "I believe you," he said, surprising them both with the certainty in his voice. He glanced at the clock, then toward the window, where snow continued to fall. The boarding house was full, he knew that. The church would be locked, even if it weren't. The idea of leaving her there alone didn't sit right with him. He thought of Margaret, of what he would have wanted someone to do for her, if she'd been the one standing in the cold with no one to claim her. "There's a spare room at my place," he said after a moment. The words felt heavy, significant. "It's nothing fancy, but it's warm and it's safe. You can stay the night. We'll figure out the rest tomorrow." Clara stared at him, shock giving way to something dangerously close to relief. "I couldn't," she began, instinctively refusing what she needed most. "I don't want to impose." "You're not," Eli said gently, though he knew that wasn't entirely true. "It's just a room." She swallowed, eyes burning, and nodded. "Thank you," she whispered, the words carrying more weight than she could express. In that moment, she didn't know this decision would change both their lives. She only knew that for the first time in a very long while, someone had seen her and chosen to care. As they walked through the snow toward his house, the town quiet around them, Eli felt something shift inside his chest. He told himself it was responsibility, nothing more. He told himself this was temporary, a kindness offered without expectation. But when he unlocked the door and showed her the small, clean room at the back of the house, he noticed the way she touched the quilt on the bed like it was sacred, the way her shoulders finally relaxed, and he wondered, not for the first time since Margaret died, what it might mean to let someone else stay. Clara sat on the edge of the bed long after he left her alone, listening to the sounds of the house settling around her. She set her suitcase down and rested her hands on it, breathing deeply. She was still unclaimed, still uncertain, but she was warm. She was safe, and somewhere in the quiet, A fragile thought took root. Maybe this wasn't the end of her story. Maybe it was the beginning of something she couldn't yet name. And as you listen to this story unfold, remember, every life has moments like this. Crossroads shaped by quiet kindness and unexpected mercy. If stories of second chances, resilience, and slow-burning hope move you, make sure to stay with us. Subscribe to the channel and be part of a place where forgotten souls find their way home. One story at a time.